We ought to get to a place whereby we settle it within us that companionship is seasonal and godly. Seasonal because changes will be experienced that will require adjustments, new skills, new approaches, new strategies. Amen. And godly because it is relationship based, and relationship is God's idea and design. And in order for us to succeed in relationships, we ought to be spirit led, even in our companionship relationships. Amen. Previously, we had examined the separation of John Mark and Paul, or rather, the separation of John Mark from Paul and Barnabas, and later the separation of Paul and Barnabas. When we get to a place where we live in the reality that companionships are seasonal and godly, as we have seen in scriptures many times, we will keep a godly attitude even as we move on, knowing that as long as seasons remain, the Lord might cause our paths to meet again for a different assignment. Amen. Paul, Barnabas, and John Mark walked together during a missionary journey and were later separated. Then came another season whereby Paul and John Mark had to work together. We know this because Paul refers to John Mark as his co-worker when we read the epistle of Philemon, as recorded in Philemon chapter 1, verse 24. This same John Mark is referred to as a helpful person by Paul in 2 Timothy 4:11. I'll read this for you from the New International Version. It says, "Only Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you because he is helpful to me in my ministry." Now, this was Paul speaking to his son in the Lord, Timothy, about Mark. Previously, we remembered that John Mark was the one who deserted Paul and Barnabas and went back to Jerusalem. But at this point, when Paul made reference to John Mark, he made reference to him as a helpful person. Amen. So in conclusion, we will say this: as you get wiser in your companionship relationships, carefully make decisions. Always remember the following: do not discredit a person just because you do not get along with that person during a particular season. Paul did not discredit Barnabas, neither did Barnabas discredit Paul, even when they disagreed. Amen. The next thing is this: disapprove of the character or behavior that a person is portraying, which is ungodly. However, do your best not to get into disagreements with the person. Disapprove of the behavior, but do not get into disagreements with the person. When John Mark deserted Paul and Barnabas, Paul, referring to that incident, said to Barnabas he did not think it wise to go on a trip to visit the believers with John Mark. Paul disapproved of John Mark's character, yet he did not get into any disagreements with John Mark. Now, do not compromise your values and standards just to accommodate mediocrity from another person. This is another thing we need to learn. Paul was not going to stoop for disloyalty, lack of integrity, and lack of purpose and focus from any source. Paul had values and standards, and he stood for what he believed despite the odds. Amen. Another thing is this: accept the fact that you might and will be misunderstood for maintaining very exceptional standards and an excellent spirit. However, keep praying for others so that their eyes might open up to the reality of how to do relationships better. Amen. And the last thing we want to say is this: the people who show sign of immaturity today may later grow up to have exceptional values and do exploits in the kingdom. I say this because John Mark is the author of the book of Mark in the New Testament. He was the one who deserted Paul and Barnabas while on a missionary trip. But here is the person writing the book of Mark and telling us about the exploits that were done in the kingdom. Amen.